Right. So, like, you ever feel like the news is just like this fire hose and you're just trying to sip some information, but it's blasting you in the face?
Totally. I mean, it's relentless. From the
No.
moment you wake up till you try to sleep, there's always something.
Right. So, think of this deep dive as your like cheat sheet. We've got your local Spokane happenings, political dramas, AI craziness, even the
That
financial
sounds.
markets and what's shaking the globe, all without having to scroll for hours. Yeah.
And what's super cool is when you look at all these headlines together, you start to see these like crazy connections, like how something a school board decides here can echo national politics, or how an AI lab in, say, California can ripple out and change industries everywhere. We're here to help you spot that stuff.
So, local news first. Spokane's own Anne McClain, NASA astronaut, she launched to space today.
Yeah, it was take two, right? After that little delay.
Exactly. Seeing that SpaceX Dragon Endurance, was it? Liftoff from Kennedy Space Center with her and the crew 10 folks aboard. I mean, picture that.
Must have been wild.
And the speed, right. 17,500 miles per hour, roughly.
Yeah.
That's what it takes to reach the ISS.
It's mind-blowing. That velocity is what keeps you in orbit, counteracting Earth's gravity.
Yeah.
And, after that initial glitch, this successful launch, it really shows how seriously they take safety, plus the dedication of the whole team.
From space, back to Earth, and specifically, the Meade School District.
Bit of a tug-of-war going on with Washington State over gender policies. They appealed to the feds, like the Attorney General, even the Education Secretary. They're saying they're stuck.
Yeah, the core of their argument is they see this conflict between directives from the Trump administration on like transgender students in schools and then Washington's own anti-discrimination laws.
So they're worried that if they follow state rules, like about pronouns, which bathrooms kids use, sports participation,
Right.
that they could lose federal funding because it might be seen as going against those executive orders.
Right.
But the state's not budging. Their education officials say, listen, you got to follow state law, protect these students. So this could be headed to court or some kind of intervention from like way up high.
Yeah, this tension between states and the feds on stuff like civil rights in schools, it's not new.
Yeah.
What happens in other cases like this around the country, it'll definitely inform what goes down here.
Absolutely. It's a major issue that's playing out nationwide. And this case in Spokane could set a precedent.
Much heavier news now. We have the sentencing in the John Eisenman case here. 25 years for the murder of his daughter's ex-boyfriend back in 2020.
Yeah, this one is just awful. Finding Andrew Sorensen's body like that, bound, stabbed in a car trunk.
Horrific. And then there's the fact that Eisenman claims Sorensen was involved in sex trafficking, that he'd exploited his daughter. The police investigated and found zero evidence.
Right. It just goes to show how dangerous vigilantism can be, especially when it's driven by, information that isn't even true. The victim's family said this sentence brings some justice, which I can understand. But of course, it doesn't bring back their loved one.
It's a tragic reminder that even baseless claims, especially ones that grab attention like that, can have really terrible consequences. Switching gears now to a more positive development locally. Spokane's mayor, Lisa Brown, and the city council president, Betsy Wilkerson, they're proposing to use almost $1.5 million from those opioid lawsuit settlements for local behavioral health programs.
This is really smart. They've got a specific plan, too. Expanding medication-assisted treatment at the Spokane Regional Health District Clinic, adding detox beds, sobering beds, they call them at a rehab center. They even want to hire a dedicated opioid program coordinator and provide culturally specific treatment services.
And it's a joint effort with Spokane County, which makes sense, right? It's not like the opioid crisis stops at city limits.
Exactly. It's a regional issue that needs a regional response.
What I really appreciate is their focus on directing these national settlement funds right back into the communities hit hardest, like Spokane, and using this one-time money strategically, not just to plug holes in the general budget.
And the emphasis on evidence-based treatments, that's huge. And making sure they address the specific needs of different communities within Spokane, this could really make a difference.
All right, let's zoom out a bit. AI and tech this week was a whirlwind. OpenAI making moves, Meta getting into hardware, even some controversy around Elon Musk's chatbot. What should we tackle first?
Well, OpenAI is making waves. They released these new developer tools, the big one being the Responses API. The idea is it helps developers create more sophisticated AI agents.
AI agents, so like AI that can do things on its own.
Exactly. Think of them as AI systems that can handle tasks autonomously. It's a big step towards making AI more independent.
Interesting. And this new API, replaces their old Assistance API, right?
Ooh.
But it's not costing developers any extra. Seems like a good move in a market where everyone's fighting for attention.
Smart move for sure. OpenAI's got competition breathing down their neck, especially from those Chinese AI startups like DeepSeek and Monica. I hear those are offering similar performance but cheaper.
Ah, so they're trying to keep their developers happy, give them more power.
Makes sense. In this fast-paced AI world, you got to stay ahead of the game.
And speaking of competition, Meta's getting into the hardware game, testing their own custom AI chip. That's a bold move.
It's huge. They're trying to become less dependent on the big chip suppliers like NVIDIA, but also they're aiming to reduce power consumption and costs for their AI stuff. It's expensive, all that computing power.
I bet they spend like billions every year on AI infrastructure.
Exactly. So controlling the hardware, it's a long-term strategy for them. If this test phase goes well, they want to ramp up production for things like content recommendation, generative AI, all that.
Wow. So this trend of big tech making their own chips, it really shows how important hardware is becoming in this whole AI race.
Absolutely. As AI gets more complex, the demand for specialized hardware grows exponentially. Having custom silicon tailored to their specific needs could give Meta a real edge.
Okay, but Google isn't sitting around either. They just launched 2 new AI models, specifically for robots, built on their Gemini 2.0 AI. Sounds like robots are getting a serious upgrade.
Kiss is some next-level stuff. One's called Gemini Robotics, and it's a vision language action model. That means it can process what it sees, understand text, and actually do physical tasks.
Wow. So it's not just moving blindly, it's actually understanding its surroundings and following instructions.
Exactly. Then there's Robotics ER, which is all about environmental reasoning. It gives robots, like, spatial awareness. They can plan their actions in their environment much better.
So less bumping into stuff, more actual helpfulness.
That's the goal. Google's claiming these models can work on all sorts of robots. And developers can use them to create custom routines with some pretty advanced AI reasoning. Imagine what that could do for robotic startups.
Yeah, it could be a game changer. Lower development costs, faster commercialization. Makes robots less of a sci-fi dream and more of a real-world thing.
It's exciting, especially because this comes right after a robotics company decided to ditch OpenAI and develop their own AI. Shows you how competitive this field is.
Okay, so Meta's not just about hardware. They're also boosting their AI software. They've got this Llama model, and now they've released Llama 4, which can understand voice commands.
Yep, they're moving beyond just text-based AI. They want more natural interactions between humans and computers through speech.
Like talking to your computer, Star Trek style.
Kinda. Llama 4 is designed to make virtual assistants and call center bots way better. Imagine smoother conversations, real-time translation, even those multi-turn dialogues that feel more like talking to a person.
That would be wild.
No.
The more like, I didn't understand that. Please rephrase.
Exactly. Meta thinks this will make AI-driven customer service and translation super seamless. This integration of voice into Llama shows how the big AI players are making their systems more versatile.
It's like they're trying to create AI that can do it all. And since Meta's a big NVIDIA customer, some people are guessing they might drop some hints about their next-gen chip architecture at NVIDIA's GTC conference. You know, their big GPU event. Stuff like their Blackwell and Rubin GPUs.
Definitely possible. Meta's investing heavily in both custom silicon and those powerful NVIDIA GPUs. It just shows how much computing power these AI models need to be trained and run. Anything they reveal about their hardware plans is going to be big news.
Speaking of big news, Elon Musk's chatbot, Grok, got itself into some hot water this week. Made a pretty charged statement about former President Trump. Sparked a whole debate about bias in AI.
Yeah, this one blew up fast. Grok basically claimed that Trump was a Putin-compromised asset that spread like wildfire online, and people immediately started accusing it of being biased.
And it raises some serious questions, right? Like, what data are they training these AI models on? How do they control what these things say?
Absolutely. Musk has always presented Grok as this truth-seeking alternative to ChatGPT. So when it spits out something like this, it really undermines that image, makes people worry about whether AI is just going to become a tool for spreading misinformation.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that even with all this amazing AI tech, we need to be really careful about how it's developed and used. We need safeguards, guidelines, something to make sure it doesn't become a force for spreading falsehoods or amplifying existing biases.
Totally agree. We need to prioritize ethical development and responsible use of AI alongside its technological advancements.
Now, onto the financial markets. They've been a bit of a roller coaster this week. Big rebound on Friday after a pretty rough sell-off Thursday. What's the overall vibe?
Well, it's still volatile out there. Friday was a good day for sure. S&P 500 jumped over 2%, Nasdaq even more, almost 3%. Their best days of the year so far. But it came after that correction, remember?
Right, so maybe not all sunshine and rainbows yet.
Yeah, exactly. And despite that Friday rally, all the major indexes ended the week down, fourth week in a row. So investors are still a bit jittery.
You mentioned policy uncertainty as a factor. Are those new tariff threats from the Trump administration playing a big role?
Definitely a major factor. Investors are worried about those tariffs reigniting inflation. It's been a persistent concern. Plus, businesses are worried about supply chain problems. All of this happening against the backdrop of higher interest rates and the whole global situation. It's a recipe for volatility.
So even with Friday's gains, the underlying anxieties haven't vanished. Interesting that tech stocks seemed to lead the charge that day, though. Nvidia and Tesla both jumped.
With Nvidia, it seems analysts think the sell-off went too far. They overcorrected. Even with that over 5% jump, the stock is still down around 10% since the year started. Remember those fears about competition from China, especially DeepSeek?
Yeah, that was a big story a while back.
It was. But there's a lot of buzz around Nvidia's upcoming GTC conference, so some investors are probably betting on good news coming out of that.
And Tesla. They've had a rough few months. Stock's been sliding since December. Demand concerns those price cuts.
Yeah, investors haven't been thrilled. So that almost 4% jump on Friday was probably a relief. Part of it was just the general market mood lifting, but there were also some bargain hunters scooping up what they saw as undervalued stock.
Makes sense. And it wasn't just them. Other big tech companies saw gains too. Looks like investors are cautiously dipping their toes back into growth stocks. Maybe the slightly cooler inflation numbers help too.
It's all interconnected. And it wasn't just stocks bouncing back. Crypto got a boost on Friday, too. Bitcoin climbed back above $80,000. Been a wild ride for crypto lately.
Up, down, all over the place.
Exactly. Seeing Bitcoin back above 80 grand, trading around 84,300, that's something after it dipped below that level. Even with the volatility, it's still up a lot since the year started.
I saw that crypto-linked stocks rallied too. MicroStrategy, Coinbase, Robinhood,
Right.
all up.
It points to that renewed risk appetite in the market. Plus, there's still that anticipation of maybe a Bitcoin ETF getting approved. But, regulators are still warning folks about the risks.
Right, right. Easy come, easy go, as they say.
Exactly. Crypto can turn on a dime. Even seasoned traders are like, be careful out there. We also saw decent gains for Ethereum and some other altcoins. Gold, on the other hand, went up a bit, but then pulled back from that $3,000 per ounce level.
So plenty of action across all those markets. Now on to U.S. politics. New tariffs, a spending bill that barely passed, a leaked travel ban proposal. Feels like a lot's happening in Washington.
Always something, right?
Let's start with those tariffs. Feels like we're going back in time, back to the trade wars of a few years ago.
A bit of deja vu, yeah. Trump's pushing for these new tariffs, says it's to protect American industries. We don't know exactly which imports they're targeting yet, but just the talk of it has spooked the markets. Inflation fears, supply chain worries.
And it's not just us. The EU's not happy either. They're talking about retaliation.
Yeah, this could get messy. Some people love tariffs, think they bring back manufacturing jobs. Others say they just raise prices for everyone and hurt our relationships with other countries.
So a lot of disagreement on whether this is a good move.
Big time. The White House is saying, don't worry, these tariffs will be strategic. They won't mess up our progress on fighting inflation. But the markets and our allies, they're not so sure.
Meanwhile, Congress just barely dodged a government shutdown. They passed that stopgap spending bill. But there were some tough compromises, especially when it came to aid for Ukraine.
Right. They funded the government through the rest of the fiscal year, but no extra money for Ukraine. Most Democrats voted against it. Senator Patty Murray, she was furious, said they cut out vital aid for Ukraine and all sorts of other important stuff.
Sounds like a lot of Democrats were unhappy, both in the House and the Senate.
Yep. But Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, he let it go to a vote to avoid a shutdown. And Trump signed it quickly. So they kept the lights on, but it feels like a win for the Republicans, especially the more conservative wing of the House. They got a lot of their budget priorities through.
Absolutely. And this decision to withhold military aid to Ukraine has really rattled our European allies. The EU held an emergency meeting, pledged to increase their own military assistance. They're scrambling to fill the gap.
So a lot of uncertainty about what happens next with that aid. The administration hasn't completely ruled out a separate vote on Ukraine funding, but for now, It's a waiting game.
It is. And to add to the political drama, we've got this leaked proposal for a new travel ban. This one would target citizens from something like 43 countries, way more than the 2017 ban.
At 43, that's a lot.
It's huge. The leaked documents from Homeland Security, they show this draft list. Mostly Muslim-majority countries, African nations. Some weren't even on the original ban. Now the State Department's got to review this list, give some kind of security justification. Civil rights groups are already calling it Muslim Ban 2.0. They're not happy.
Not at all. The administration is saying it's all about security, about screening potential threats, and they want to pressure other governments to share more intel with us. But a lot of people are skeptical, especially given how broad this ban is.
Sounds like legal challenges are a given if this thing actually goes through.
Almost certainly. And there's a lot of lobbying going on behind the scenes. Diplomats from the affected countries are pushing back hard, so who knows what the final version will look like or when we might see it. But if it's anything close to what's been leaked, it's a massive change to U.S. immigration policy.
Meanwhile, Trump gave a law and order speech at the Justice Department. His labor secretary pick got confirmed. There's a new executive order on oil and gas leasing on federal land. And the House Republicans are still busy investigating the Afghanistan withdrawal and the FBI.
Sure. It's a lot to keep track of. The administration is pushing its agenda, and the political divisions in the country are as strong as ever.
Well said. Now, a quick update on the Dogecoin front. Seems the popularity of crypto is attracting scammers like moths to a flame. And Dogecoin holders are a prime target.
Yeah, sadly. There's this new scam going around specifically targeting Dogecoin folks. They're using the name of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
Right, that's the one Musk heads up.
Exactly. The scammers are impersonating Musk or the DOGE agency, sending out emails promising free crypto. Basically, they say, send us some Dogecoin, and we'll give you way more back.
It's that classic free crypto giveaway scam, and they make it look official too, using real logos and stuff.
Convincing, right? But people need to know there is no official Dogecoin airdrop or refund program from the DOGE agency. Even though there's been talk of potential savings from that program, no actual Dogecoin is being distributed.
So even if someone mentions DOGE and savings, it doesn't mean they're giving away free Dogecoin.
Exactly. The golden rule with crypto: never send your crypto to someone promising you more in return. Nobody gives away free crypto. It's a scam. This one's just clever because they're using the whole DOGE thing to trick people. Even the Spokane Police Department and the FTC have put out warnings about this. They're seeing a spike in crypto fraud complaints.
It's scary how sophisticated these scams are getting. Speaking of Dogecoin, it's been relatively quiet on the legal and regulatory front this year. Remember that big lawsuit against Elon Musk accusing him of manipulating the Dogecoin market?
Oh yeah, that one was huge.
It got dismissed late last year, and I heard they dropped the appeal quietly.
That's right. So no major actions directly against Dogecoin for now. But regulators are still watching the whole meme coin scene closely. They're cracking down on scams in general, like that recent DOJ case, that pump and dump scheme that was worth like $1.8 billion.
Wow, so they're not messing around.
Nope. And there's still that debate among lawmakers about what Dogecoin even is. Is it a security, a commodity, just some community-driven token? How they classify it will determine how they regulate it.
So for now, it's kind of the Wild West out there for Dogecoin.
Pretty much. But if there are more big scams, you can bet the feds will step in. So the advice is the same. Be careful out there. Enable those fraud alerts. Use reputable exchanges. And if something sounds too good to be true, well, you know the rest.
Words to live by in the crypto world. Let's wrap up with some global news. The situation in Ukraine seems to be at a turning point. There's a big push for a ceasefire, especially with the U.S. halting aid.
Yeah, things are really heating up over there, and not in a good way. Trump's decision to suspend all military aid to Ukraine until they reevaluate things, it's shaken up the whole Western alliance. Nobody's quite sure what's going to happen next.
It's a big change in U.S. policy. And the European allies are scrambling to figure out how to respond. They just had an emergency EU summit. They're reaffirming their support for Ukraine, promising to send more weapons themselves, trying to make up for that potential loss of U.S. aid.
Makes sense. They don't want to leave Ukraine hanging. The UK Prime Minister is also hosting this, coalition of the willing meeting to coordinate aid.
So everyone's trying to figure out how to move forward without the U.S. taking the lead. Meanwhile, the G7 foreign ministers, they're still backing Ukraine's sovereignty, and they're pushing for a ceasefire. They mentioned that meeting in Saudi Arabia where the U.S. was like, hey, Ukraine, Maybe think about this ceasefire proposal.
Right, but the terms were apparently pretty favorable to Russia, so it's not surprising Ukraine wasn't thrilled.
Yeah, basically freezing the conflict with Russia, keeping all the territory they've taken, not exactly a win for Ukraine. The G7 is praising Ukraine for saying they're open to an immediate ceasefire and urging Russia to do the same. But Russia's response has been pretty lukewarm so far.
Putin's basically saying, sure, we'll talk ceasefire, but only if Ukraine accepts our terms. And those terms, well, Ukraine sees them as a non-starter.
So, a bit of a deadlock there. The G7's warning Russia that if they don't agree to a fair ceasefire, there will be more consequences, more sanctions, maybe even new limits on oil prices. So, a lot of diplomatic back and forth going on.
It's a delicate situation. The U.S. policy shift has thrown everything up in the air. Now the Europeans are trying to walk this tightrope, supporting Ukraine, while also trying to make these U.S.-led peace efforts work.
Talk about a diplomatic headache. Over the Middle East, things in Gaza are still shaky after last year's war. And the humanitarian situation is, well, it's a mess.
It is. The G7 is demanding Hamas release all those hostages and return the remains of those who didn't make it. They're also urging continued international aid for rebuilding, but with the condition that it bypasses Hamas.
Which is going to be tricky. And it's not just Gaza. The West Bank is seeing more violence, more clashes.
Yeah, things are escalating there. The G7 is calling for de-escalation from both sides, Israeli forces and the Palestinian Authority. There have been more Israeli raids, more settler violence.
Not a good sign. U.S. envoys are trying to restart peace talks, but it doesn't seem like there's much progress. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and Iran are getting closer thanks to China playing mediator.
It's a complicated region with a lot of moving parts. And on the global economic front, those U.S. tariffs are causing friction. China's not happy. They're talking about countermeasures.
Hey boy, here we go again.
Right. And economists are warning that this could escalate into a full-blown trade war, which would be bad news for everyone. Global growth would take a hit. Meanwhile, oil prices are all over the place. OPEC might cut production, which would push prices up.
Fun times. And on the climate front, no good news there either. UN scientists say 2024 was the hottest year ever recorded, and 2025 might be even hotter.
Yikes, that's not good. Makes the upcoming UN Climate Summit even more important. And we're already seeing the effects, right? Cyclone Halima, that drought in South America.
Scary stuff. Finally, over in the Asia-Pacific region, things are tense between China and Taiwan. China's been doing these big military exercises near Taiwan, sending a message, basically.
Definitely a show of force. It was after those election results in Taiwan where the pro-independence side did well. China wasn't happy.
I bet not.
Taiwan's protesting, of course. And the U.S. is urging China to cool it, saying they're worried about any attempt to take Taiwan by force. Meanwhile, a U.S. Navy carrier strike group visited the Philippines, and North Korea launched more ballistic missiles. Got condemned by the UN for that, as usual.
So a lot of muscle flexing going on in that part of the world. Diplomatic channels are still open, but it feels precarious.
It does. The whole region is on edge.
Well, there you have it. Your whirlwind tour of the day's news from right here in Spokane to the other side of the world makes you realize how much is happening every single day and how connected we all are.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, but also a little overwhelming. What really stood out to me today was how these tech developments, especially in AI, are influencing everything else. Politics, economics, social issues. It's shaping our future in profound ways.
It's true. AI is everywhere. And as you go about your day, think about what's happening on the world stage, especially in Ukraine. It's a complex situation that could have major consequences for all of us. Staying informed is more important than ever. Hopefully, this deep dive helped you do